The opinions expressed in the following programs are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect those of Rogers nor Rogers TV.
Hi, I'm Justice.
And I'm Nia. And we believe dreams fuel revolutions.
That's why we're engaging with Canadian icons and the causes they support.
Join us for these inspiring conversations and find out how you can be revolutionary.
Welcome to another episode of In Conversation with Alethia. I am your host, Alethia O'Hara Stevenson. In this show, we sit down with amazing guests who have an incredible story to tell. The show will educate, it will empower, and it will inspire you. On this episode of In Conversation with Alethia, I am honored to have an amazing guest. Her name is Dhawne Foster. She's an Afro-Indigenous woman, mother, an amazing educator, currently working with the Peel District School Board as an Indigenous student advisor. Her story is rich with culture, it is rich with history, and it is awe-inspiring. Her story will want you to learn more. Please welcome Dhawne to the show. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
It is amazing to have you. I am so inspired by your story. We connected briefly over the weekend just to get a little bit about your background, and I didn't realize how rich your story was and powerful.
Yes.
Oh my goodness. I'm going to dive into your story, but I want to talk about your mom. You brought your mom with you today. That's absolutely amazing. What a special bond you have.
Yes. My mom and my father, who's passed now, are everything to me.
Amazing.
And, like, extremely supportive of everything that I wanted to try and do and accomplish. And they were always my, heroes and people that I aspire to be like.
Wow, that's powerful. And I imagine, with moms, you have special stories and traditions and moments that you share. With my daughter, I love just sitting back and, watching, I call it girly movies, right? That's our moment. Do you have those special moments with your mom where you just do mom and daughter things?
Yeah, well, we have a table that my mom bought when my parents first moved to Brampton from Beaver Lumber, and we still have that table now, and we sit around the table and we talk about history, and we talk about politics and things that are happening in the world, and we talk about being women.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
I love it. Since you started talking about history, I'm going to go right into your history.
Okay.
So, as I mentioned, at the start of the show, that your background is so rich with history and culture, and, the fact that you're an Afro-Indigenous woman. Can you share a little bit about your history? And I know you've got a history on your mom's side and you have a history on your dad's side. Can you dive into that a little bit for us? And
Sure. So on my father's side, I am Jamaican.
Wow.
Dutch, Irish, and Ojibwe. And on my mother's side, I am enslaved Black, unfortunately, due to colonization, Cherokee,
wow,
and Seminole, and Jewish.
Fascinating. Now, that is a very complex and diverse history. How has that shaped you into the woman that you are today?
Oh, so many things. I think identity, though. Growing up, it wasn't always easy growing up. Trying to figure out who I was and trying to figure out just where I'm going to go, where I'm going to travel, who I'm going to be. So growing up, trying to figure out all of my genealogy and history.
Right.
That was very important to me. It's still very important to me. So I'm still tracing my ancestors.
That is so neat.
And going back into history and just researching it and just trying to understand the timelines that they all came to Canada, or what was happening in Canada at the time, what I call Turtle Island.
Okay.
So, I have we were just looking at the books just before we started, and both of my great-grandfathers came to Canada at the same time, 1910.
Oh my gosh.
So my great-great-grandfather on my mother's side was an enslaved Black and Cherokee. And my great-great-grandmother was Black, enslaved Black, and Seminole.
Wow.
So they were fleeing from an Arkansas plantation, which I'm still trying to research. I'm still trying to figure out exactly where that is. They came to Edmonton in a place called Amber Valley.
Okay, yes, I've heard of Amber Valley, yeah.
And some of the stories my mom's told me over the years, one of the ones that she recently told me was growing up, being a little girl, and playing in a place called Hattie's Harlem Chicken.
Okay.
A restaurant where a lot of the people that were coming to Canada at the time, the Black people that were coming to Canada at the time, that's where you would go for, you know, your music. That's where you would go to meet. That's where you would go for, you know, teachings or, you know, talking and just being together. And my mom was a kid that would run around in the restaurant at that time. And at that time, there would be, you know, entertainers coming.
Wow. At
the time. So, you know, that's one thing. And then my great-grandfather on my father's side came from Westmoreland, Jamaica.
Okay.
And when he came to Toronto, he helped start the BME Church.
Okay, that's the Black Methodist.
Methodist Church in Toronto. And the stories are so similar that, you know, whenever Black people were coming together, wherever they were coming, there was always a place that they would meet. And the first thing was getting your homestead together.
Yes.
And the second thing would be getting your foundation, whether it be religious or, you know, starting a church or starting a school. You know, getting the community together.
Yeah, that's the foundation that you need for any community, right? A place where people can gather to learn and share that history. I love how you talked about your mom, you know, in Edmonton and Amber Valley and sitting in Hattie's restaurant. That's a rich part of, I believe, Indigenous history, as well as, you know, I'm going to speak just specifically from a Jamaican perspective. Oral history is so critical because that's how we share our stories and we pass it down to generations. That's amazing. Now, you talked about Cherokee and Seminole. Yes. Are those, I'm not familiar with either of those two lineage. Are they in Canada or are they predominantly more from the States side?
From the United States.
Okay.
Yes.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
So as a woman, you know, now navigating your own identity, being Afro-Indigenous here in Canada, how has it been? Because you've talked about Dutch ancestry, you've talked about, I believe, Irish ancestry as well. And of course, you've got the Black, you've got Indigenous ancestry and Jewish ancestry, and it's so complex. How was it for you to navigate into a space? And oftentimes I hear individuals with mixed ancestry talking about finding a place where they belong.
Yes.
How has that been for you?
It's difficult at times. I know growing up in high school, not being able to really relate to everybody all the time. And I learned how to adapt and I learned how to code switch.
Yes.
So, you know, when I'm with my Jamaican friends, like my godchildren, they're Jamaican. So like I can switch back and forth. And then I understood where my spaces were, and I understood who I could open up to, and I could understand who I had to guard myself with. And that's something that a lot of students face right now in all of our schools. So that's something that I really want to be able to share with them, that I grew up in those ways too. We're not fitting in and having the identity. It can be crumbling to your spirit. But I'm still here, right?
You're still standing strong.
Yeah.
I want to touch on, you know, how you've transitioned into an Indigenous student advisor, but you touched on code switching, and I don't think many of our viewers would know what code switching is. And you gave a brief example. Can you elaborate on that a little bit? Because it's something that I've used in my professional life, in my everyday life. Can you explain a little bit more about code switching?
Yeah. So, like growing up, you know, like I was taught by my father to, and it's a colonized ideal, is to think, to speak the King's English.
Absolutely.
So I grew up having to speak proper English, right? Whereas, you know, my cousins, they grew up more in Toronto, and had more of the Jamaican background.
Yes.
So they're able to, you know, when I'm with them people, I speak one way. You know what I'm saying?
Exactly.
And then when I'm in another space, I speak another way.
Yeah.
If I'm with my Anishinaabe people, I'm very different.
Yeah.
So, you know, it does struggle with your identity over time. But when you understand, like for me, I'm understanding now that I'm Anishinaabe Kwe. I am an Ojibwe woman. So I know that I am a powerful being.
Yes.
And I know that I'm a water carrier, I'm a water barrier. I give life, as do you. So I know that I'm a powerful being.
Wow.
But with the code switching, it's exhausting. And I truly believe freedom over code switching. I don't feel anymore that I should have to change who I am to get into different spaces, because we're all here, and I truly believe that we need to start unifying and being as one people.
Yes, I absolutely agree with you there. And I wonder how we can get to that place where individuals no longer feel that they have to code switch, right? Will we ever get there?
Will we ever get there?
That's amazing, though, but that takes a certain level of courage and strength, because it's exhausting, right? It's taxing on the body, it's taxing on the mind to have to navigate these spaces and having to wear different hats, having to code switch, you know, in the different spaces that you sit in. You touched on the fact that, you know, the impact on students. Why was it important for you? Do have an ECE background, but why was it important for you to transition into now being an Indigenous student advisor?
Okay. So as an early childhood educator for over 20 years, that's what I do. That's who I am. You know, working with the little ones, the young minds, having a good time. Originally, I was not going to apply to be an Indigenous education student advisor because at the time, who I am, I was scared. I was scared to go out there and get into that space. But now that I'm here and I'm meeting students, and I'm meeting students that are like me, that are, you know, Afro-Indigenous, now that I'm meeting them and seeing them and they're looking up to me, I'm like, I have to be here.
You have to represent.
I have to be here, yeah. So, you know, I try every day to empower them to understand that they're bright, they're beautiful, and they're brilliant. All of the students are brilliant that I'm meeting. And I just want them to understand that they have a support system with what we're trying to do at the Peel District School Board is we're trying to make sure that the kids that are coming from us or coming underneath us have what we wanted, what we craved for. For me, if I had a teacher growing up that was a Black teacher,
oh my gosh,
or an Indigenous teacher, I probably would have went further in my education.
Would have been transformative.
Like I look at some of the people that I look up to as mentors, like Fiona Lloyd-Henry, Natasha Henry-Dixon. There's also Kalinda Clyde.
Yes.
Like I look up to those people, and if those people were my teachers, I would have been so blessed.
Yes.
And I would have gone so much farther in my education.
I totally agree with that. And, you know, that's absolutely inspiring to know that, you know, you now have mentors that you can look up to and you are now playing the part of a mentor and creating that safe space for students. So we're going to pick up the conversation. We're going to be right back with In Conversation with Alethia and taking up the conversation with Dhawne Foster, talking about her role in the school system. We'll be right back.
Morgan, host of Raising Energy on Rogers TV. Join us each week as we are back in the studio doing live psychic readings. I work with guides, guardians, angels, archangels. I'm a free-for-all. I even bring through animals and messages from loved ones to bring you closure. Check out rogerstv.com/raising energy for our listings and airtimes and for your free tickets.
watching Rogers TV.
Welcome back to In Conversation with Alethia. I'm here with Dhawne Foster, and we're talking about her journey into Indigenous Student Advisor with the Peel District School Board. So we left off the conversation talking about, mentors who currently influence you and your role as a mentor now to these students. What has the impact been like? And I think often we hear about safe space. I imagine this is exactly what a safe space would look like for our Indigenous and Afro-Indigenous students. What has the impact been like?
Well,
I imagine it's probably hard, right?
Yeah, it's every day is a little bit different, and meeting with each student is a little bit different. So I just try to create an infinity space with some students. We might meet with 3 or 4 at a time, or we might meet one-on-one and just, have conversations, talk about a little bit of culture, and then maybe do some activities together and just build that confidence and social emotional and mental health. Mental health is really important right now, especially for Indigenous and Afro-Indigenous students and Black students as well. Building that confidence in children, it has to start right from kindergarten all the way up.
Yes, and you talk about confidence, and that is so critical because, again, when you can have a conversation with someone who understands you, and this may sound a little bit controversial, but when you have somebody who understands your history, the food that you eat, the way you speak, body language, it goes a long way in building your own self-esteem and your confidence. And I know from even my experience, when I walk into a school and I see a Black student, their posture is different because they understand that there's an auntie in the room or there's a mom in the room, right?
Exactly.
So I totally understand when you talk about confidence and self-esteem in our young people that you get a chance to mentor. What questions do they often ask? Like, do they ask you sometimes the most basic questions in terms of, how you have been able to navigate your space as an adult?
They ask me a lot of questions. They really do, and I'm very transparent with them. I give them as much as myself as I can, and I do share my personal stories with them because I believe that we have to build connection, and the best way to do that is having that vulnerability and letting them know that, even as a grown-up, I might have had a bad day or a bad situation, but I can get through it. I can be resilient and I can be strong and I can still push through it.
Yes.
And I try to help them a little bit with their academics of how they can get, different help, different supports, different resources. And I try to give them as much, boost, confidence, let them know that they can do it. They can do anything that their minds anything that their minds,
anything that they can imagine, they can achieve. One of the things I love about you being in this role is just that ability to help our young people realize and understand their gifts and that they, in the skin that they're in, they're beautiful. They, are brilliant just the way they are, right? Because often that's a conversation that they're not getting from someone who they're not able to identify with. That's not the message that they're getting. And the media doesn't really provide that space where, you're building self-esteem and confidence in young people. So that's why this show is absolutely critical, right? Because we're bringing the message to the community to let young Indigenous and Afro students know and realize their value. That's awesome. I want to transition because, again, we talk about loss and, things that we struggle with even as adults. And when we were having our pre-interview, you mentioned that you went through a dark period in your adult's life where you had to deal with loss and how you had to navigate from that situation into the woman that you are today. Can you share a little bit about that story and your why?
So in 2014, I had a stillborn miscarriage.
Sorry to hear that.
Yeah, and it shook me. it shook me. I couldn't get out of bed. I didn't want to see anybody. I didn't want to go anywhere. I didn't want to do anything. And I'm pretty much an active person. You know, I'm into sports, into dance, into aerobics, that kind of thing. And at that time, I didn't want anything to do with it. It was a very sad time for my husband and I. It took me about 5 months to get back into going to work.
Right.
And we know as women, it takes about 2 years for your body to fully recover after having a baby. Well, when I went back to the work that I was, the company that I was working at the time, my stomach was still big.
Oh my
and
gosh.
people that didn't know that I had lost a baby were touching my stomach.
Oh my goodness.
So I went back into that place and that space of sadness. And it's something that a lot of women go through. And it's something that's not spoken of. And it's something that passed down multi-generationally in a lot of communities.
Yes.
It's not spoken of.
Yeah.
So for me to get my story out and tell people, you know, you're not the only one.
Yes.
You're not the only one, and you can get through this.
Absolutely.
You know, I've had friends in the past that, you know, unfortunately, they've had suicidal ideologies as well as I have at that time. And I always want to say to every woman, get help. Go out there, seek help. Get your family, get your support, you know, get out there, talk about it. Even if you just have to talk to a neighbor or talk to somebody that, you know, you might not know. Get out there and talk. Just let it out, you know. And I share this story with, you know, students that can understand it. Because they know that meeting me, I'm transparent, and they know to get to know me. I share myself, and then they start sharing themselves with me as well.
Absolutely.
And to me, that's the most important thing. A lot of times, educators and teachers, they don't have the time to sit with one-on-one with a student because they have to get the curriculum done. So being in the role that I'm in, and I'm so grateful to be in this role right now, is I get to go out and I meet students, whether it's one-on-one, and I get to share with them a little bit about me, and I get to understand them. And by understanding them, I can help them understand themselves.
Exactly.
And the wonderful thing about the Peel District School Board is not only do we have Indigenous education student advisors, but we also now have Black graduation coaches. And that's something that, oh my gosh, if I had a Black graduation coach when I was a kid, I wouldn't have failed the grades that I failed. I wouldn't have failed the courses that I failed, because I would have had somebody that was there that was saying to me, you can do this, you can, you know, in school.
Absolutely.
Yes, we have our families outside that are supporting us. Not everyone has that. But to have somebody in the school working along with educators and teachers and, you know, building up the sport, cheering for kids, that is something that I would never dream of.
Right.
And to have that being built in, like for us at the Peel District School Board, our superintendent is Lisa Hart, and she is just, you know, blazing a trail for us. And it's like every time I go into a space where we have equity meetings, I look around and it's like aunties and uncles that are running these things, that are, you know, giving kids a chance and giving them back and trying to, you know, build that equity. That's not always happening.
Yes, yes. Yeah. And that's how you start to impact change and, you know, allow students the opportunity to be in a space where they can thrive, right? And then you have increase in graduation rates and, you know, bigger success and kids going on to post-secondary and achieving, you know, the jobs that they aspire to. So that is absolutely powerful. And, you know, again, talking about the strength and, you know, even going back to your loss, you know, oftentimes, especially in a Jamaican household, like, you know, I'm going to speak from that perspective because I am Jamaican born, but there's always that association of being strong, right? And when you go through a loss, the expectation is that you're supposed to endure it and just get over it. But the reality is that it takes a toll on your body emotionally, physically, mentally. And so it's not always easy to just get over it. So the fact that you're sharing your story now, I think, is quite powerful, because it will empower another woman, right? Regardless of how they identify, to be able to say, one, it's okay. You'll be okay.
Yes.
Right? But most importantly, to talk about it, have a conversation with someone.
Yes.
That's quite powerful. We touched on the fact that both your grandfathers or great-grandfathers were in books.
Yes.
Can you share a little bit about that? Just trying to switch now from such a heavy topic to something a little bit lighter.
Yes.
You know, talk a little bit about the 2 books that they're in.
So one book, it just came out. It's called Welcome to Blackhurst. It's all of the families that build that Spadina Dundas area in Toronto. So our family, my Auntie Sandra, she still lives in one of the original houses that my grandfather had. So, and those houses were built in the 1800s, and they're still standing, right?
Is it designated as a historical house? Or?
No, but I mean, the possibilities, right?
Yeah.
You never know. Yeah.
That is fascinating. I love that. And that's something that you can now pass down to your own children. You know, this is history, this is legacy.
Yeah.
Love it, love it. Now, I know we're coming towards the end of the show, but I'd love to hear, do you have any special traditions, whether it's a mixture of your unique, diverse, you know, background and identity? Do you have any special traditions that you're now able to pass down to your own children?
Well, in our family, so I grew up more, I would say, American Black. You know, when we got together, we would have, you know, macaroni pie and sweet potato and you know, that type of thing. So my grandma would be like the cook, you know.
Love it.
And I look back on my history, and I look back and I see, like, my great-great-grandmother, you know, she was a cook and a maid. And my grandmother was a cook for the Regent Appeal at a daycare for many, many years. She retired from there. My grandfather was the only Black police officer in his graduating you know, class. So I look back, and then my mother, she was a customer service rep. My mother had a 12th grade education. My father had an 8th grade education. I was the first woman on my mother's lineage to finish high school, or sorry, not high school, to finish college.
Love that. Love that.
Yeah,
I'm going to end it there. Let's end on a high note. This is absolutely amazing. So I'm hearing that you've got a rich history of cooking and the legacy of your grandparents, your grandfather, great-grandfather that is now in a book. You're now able to pass that on to our young people, to your children. So fascinating story. I loved every minute of it. Thank you so much for coming on to share your story with us. And I look forward to having more conversations with you.
Oh, thank you.
This has been amazing. So thank you so much for joining us on In Conversation with Alethia. Tune in next time as we have other amazing guests sharing their awe-inspiring stories.
Call the Rogers TV viewer response line, email us, or connect with us on social media.
I'm Nicole Martin, the proud ambassador for the Comfort Bear program. Comfort Bears provide these cuddly bears to local children who are terminally ill, facing trauma, or battling a serious illness. Every $20 donation will place a Comfort Bear in